So I've got sports reporter Sam Morton with me here, and we're going to be talking a bit more about the latest from Brighton and Hove Albion. So Sam, it looks like Brighton have finally got their Moises Caicedo replacement.
Yes, finally. It looks like they're going to be signing Carlos Baleba from Lille, a 19-year-old midfielder who has got high potential, and there's plenty of excitement around the club for what he can do. And obviously, he's got big boots to fill in Moises Caicedo, who obviously made a huge impression at Brighton. But he's obviously gone to Chelsea for £115 million. So that kind of says it all, really. Big shoes to fill, and hopefully he can do it. I mean, there's plenty of confidence that he will do that from Lille, obviously a League One side, one of the first names on the team sheet, and really did make a big impression over in France. And he's a Cameroon international as well. And he's been likened to kind of Pogba and De Bruyne. I think those were his idols growing up. That kind of compose on the ball, play out from the back, and I think he'll really settle in well to Serbi's style of play. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how he gets on, but you can trust that Brighton know what they're doing when it comes to the transfer market, and it may only be 1 or 2 years before he's linked with some big clubs as well. I mean, obviously we've seen that so often with Brighton. They pick these players up from relative obscurity and they've become huge names and bring in massive transfer fees. So yeah, hopefully it'll be another one that can do really well for Brighton.
Yeah, it feels like that. We were obviously talking about that before the show. You know, Brighton have signed so many players over the years, and although we maybe don't know as much as we could do about a Premier League player, we're kind of assuming he's going to hit the ground running, knowing Brighton's history with transfers like this.
Well, exactly. Yeah, no, they've done this so often. Obviously, you've had Caicedo, Matoma, even Ferguson up front as well. I mean, it just happens so often where Brighton seem to sign these players, and they make a huge impression. They impress everyone at the club. And they go on to sign for huge clubs for massive transfer fees, and it seems hopefully it could be another one. So we'll see how it goes.
Obviously, we've got the transfer window closing on Friday. Do you see any more activity on Brighton's end before the deadline?
So there's been some talks today about Bayer Leverkusen's forward.
Is there Amir Adli?
Adli.
It's a difficult name to pronounce, but yeah, the French winger and forward from Bayer Leverkusen.
Yeah, should I start that bit again? Sorry.
Yeah, we can start that bit again. No worries, but even if you stumble over it.
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously we've got the transfer deadline day coming on Friday. Do you see any ins, any outs with Brighton before that day?
There's been some talk about Bayer Leverkusen's forward, Amir Adli, who's a French forward, could play up front or on the left. He's 23 years old, so another young player that can really improve their career, can develop at the club, and Brighton obviously got a great history of that. So yeah, another exciting name. I think there's some excitement from the fans about that one, and it'd be interesting to see if that happens, how that goes with the talks. Obviously, with the deadline coming up on Friday at 11 p.m, it'd be interesting to see how quick that deal can be done. But yeah, another exciting talent that could potentially bolster Brighton's attacking ranks, really.
And obviously, if you were Roberto De Zerbi ahead of Friday, what sort of areas are you going to be looking to improve, do you think?
I think with Carlos Baleba, that really covers one key area that they were missing. I think in the previous game, obviously against West Ham, you could definitely see that they missed Caicedo to protect the defence. Obviously, he had lots and lots of possession, but I felt like last season there was always that danger they'd be hit on the break, and Caicedo was that protection they could fall back on. And I think they definitely did miss that against West Ham, and I think Baleba could hopefully be that. So I think with him, they've really solved that problem. But I think, you can never have too many players. I think obviously playing in Europe, so I think if they do bring in another attacker like Adli, that could really make a difference. Again, we can make an extra kind of option going forward, really. So we'll see how that progresses.
And Brighton are a team who've got quite a lot of young players as well. Do you see any of them going out on loan, or would you like to see any of those young guys go out on loan?
So I think the injury to Enciso probably scuppered a loan for Buenedette. That was a shame, because I think it would have been good to see him playing week in, week out. But it gives him a chance. It gives him a chance to maybe get more game time. So yeah, I think maybe we'll see him. Could maybe see him go out on loan, but time will tell, I guess. Hopefully Enciso's not out for too long, because obviously he was amazing against Wolves with a couple of great assists. So it'd be great to have him back as soon as possible.
And obviously looking ahead past the transfer window, like you said, Enciso's been injured. Do you know how long he might be out for at this point?
I think it's probably months rather than weeks, I think, as it stands. But fingers crossed it's not too bad, and we can see him in a couple of months, hopefully. It seems like something he did in training, so it's always a risky one, isn't it? You don't know how he's done it, if it's an impact injury or a muscle thing. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I think Brighton have obviously got a lot of depth to deal with it, as we saw against West Ham with the subs coming on and almost helping Brighton Man to come back. So it definitely helps that they have. And we saw it against Luton as well, when they brought on all the big names towards the end of the game and they just took the game beyond Luton. That can definitely be of support to them this season, and something they probably didn't have last season was that strength in depth. But going into the Europa League, they're going to need that. They're going to need to rotate the squad as much as possible.
Well, that's everything from part 1. Make sure you tune into part 2, as Sam and I will be discussing Brighton and Hove Albion's shock loss against West Ham United, as well as their upcoming fixture against Newcastle. Welcome back to latest TV news. I've got Sam Morton with me, and we're going to be discussing Brighton's shock 3-1 loss at home against West Ham United, a team who'd never beaten them in the Premier League before Saturday. So Sam, we're at that game together. What did you make of it?
Yeah, it was a strange one really, because obviously we'd seen Brighton full of confidence going into the game, and beaten Luton and beaten Wolves in emphatic fashion. So you kind of expected maybe they'd continue where they left off. But they were coming up against a side in West Ham who were also in good form. They'd just beaten Chelsea 3-1 as well. So they were in form, they were confident. So I was expecting a high-scoring game. I was going for a score draw when we went into it. I wasn't expecting what happened really. I think Brighton, obviously, as you'd expect, dominated possession, created a few clear-cut chances, not too many, but I think there's a couple where you probably think they could have scored. But on the whole, wasn't that many clear-cut chances, just a lot of the ball. And West Ham defended brilliantly, really. They really did throw everything at defending, and obviously we've said Alphonse Areola was incredible in goal, one of the best games I've seen from him. So yeah, kind of everything seemed to conspire against Brighton in that sense. And West Ham was so clinical on the counter-attack, and they hit them 3 times. And I think Adam Webster didn't have his best of games, and he probably was at fault for the 3 goals, to be fair. But yeah, it can happen. With the way Brighton play, obviously on the front foot, creating loads of chances, there's always that danger there can be hit on the break. And as I mentioned before, Moises Caicedo, him not being there was probably an issue, not having that kind of protection. And De Zerbi did make reference to that in the press conference. You've lost such a massive player in him, McAllister, and even Colwill as well. 3 massive players that have just gone this summer. So it's incredible, really. They made such a strong start to the season, despite such a key part of the team not being there anymore. But yeah, I think they'll definitely recover from this. We saw last season when they lost to Everton in a similar kind of fashion. They bounced back with a win over Arsenal to pretty much end their title hopes last season. So hopefully we'll see something similar against Newcastle at the weekend. And
do you think 3-1 was a fair result?
I think so. I think for the way West Ham played, they defended brilliantly. They deserved the win. To be honest, they were clinical, which you couldn't really say about Brighton on the day. So I think, yeah, fully deserved. David Moyes played a blinder, really, kind of perfected the counter-attacking style of play, really. And Antonio was brilliant. Jarrod Bowen was brilliant. And the goal that made it 2-0 was incredible, really. You thought there was no chance it was going to end up in goal when Antonio had the ball.
What's the third goal?
I should start again.
Yeah, we'll start again, but yeah, we'll go. So what was the last thing I was... do you think 3-1 was a fair result? Yeah,
definitely a fair result. I think West Ham defended brilliantly, were able to hit Brighton on the counter-attack to perfection, really. I think David Moyes really had that game plan mastered. And you saw really in the second goal, Benrahma on the left-hand side, you thought there was no chance they were going to be able to score from the position, and he found a brilliant cross out to Antonio. It was Jarrod Bowen, and it was a fantastic finish, fantastic goal. And it really summed the game up, really, that Brighton had the ball, had the chances, but West Ham was so dangerous on the counter-attack. And it really was game plan well executed for West Ham, really. And I think, yeah, fully deserved the 3 points. But Brighton will obviously be disappointed with the way it went. I spoke to Bart Verbruggen after the game, the goalkeeper, who's making his first appearance in the Premier League. And that's an interesting one as well. It seems like he's going to be rotating with Jason Steele in goal this season, which is not something we see too often. Usually you have your first keeper, and then you obviously have your backup for the cup games, etc. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. He's obviously going to have to impressed to keep his position in the team, and if he does so well, then he won't be able to be taken out the side. So it didn't go to plan for him, but I couldn't say he was at fault for any of the goals really. All three of them were right in the corner. You couldn't really say that he could have saved. The first one he had pretty much no hope with, but he very, very nearly kept it out, and it's just an unlucky ricochet off Billy Gilmore that ended up falling to James Ward-Prowse for the goal. So yeah, I don't think you can blame him for the goals, but yeah, overall I think deserved win for West Ham.
And also looking forward, we've got Newcastle on the horizon. How do you see that game going?
Big game. Both of them had losses at the weekend. Newcastle will obviously be gutted the way they lost against Liverpool. Against 10 men, 1-0 up, you thought there's no way they can lose from there. Loads and loads of chances, and were punished by Darwin Núñez at the end there. So they'll be licking their wounds, as well as Brighton after a defeat. So I think it makes for a big game, big, exciting game where both teams will be looking to make amends. And yeah, I can see it being a lively one. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think Brighton might struggle against Newcastle, because we've seen Newcastle under Eddie Howe. They can sometimes frustrate their opponents. They sit back, they maybe try and waste a bit of time. And these are all things we saw from Everton when they beat Brighton 5-1, and what we saw from West Ham when they beat them 3-1. Do you think this is sort of maybe becoming a theme where Roberto De Zerbi seems to be very frustrated by managers who are happy to let their teams not have the ball and sit back and frustrate the opposition?
Yeah, 100%. It's definitely Newcastle's kind of forte, you would say, and you think they can definitely take advantage of that. So it'll be interesting to see if Carlos Baleba is signed, and I know he's obviously having his medical at the moment, so if he can get that over the line and in time for the game, I think that can make a big impact. But it'll be interesting to see if he does go straight into the team. I think De Zerbi maybe will stick with his team that he's played so far this season, so it'll be interesting. But yeah, a huge game up against a really strong side in Newcastle that, in a similar way to Brighton, will be trying to adjust to playing in Europe this season as well. So they're going to have obviously the same issues with squad depth. I'm not sure Newcastle's squad is as strong as Brighton's really. When you consider the substitutes that Brighton have now, I would say it's probably stronger than Newcastle's. The first 11 is obviously fantastic for Newcastle. But yeah, and I think really Eddie Howe will be looking for a reaction from his side after the way they lost the game against Liverpool, and it makes for a good game. I think both sides will be looking to attack and try and get the kind of the clinical edge they didn't have at the weekend. So yeah, we'll see how it goes.
And if you were De Zerbi, what changes would you be making to your side for that Newcastle game?
I would definitely start João Pedro. I think he came on and had a big impact at the weekend. Really kind of helped drive the team forward and pick up those little pockets of space. I'd like to see him start maybe up front with Evan Ferguson. I think he deserves to keep his place. He's just fantastic, isn't he? Even though he didn't score again at the weekend, it was Areola that really was to blame for that, I think, with a couple of amazing saves. So yeah, I'd like to see those two start front together. I would be surprised to see Adam Webster retain his spot. As much as I think he can definitely recover, I do think he maybe needs to be taken out the firing line a little bit. So yeah, it'd be interesting. I think Van Hecker could maybe step in there. So yeah, I think those two maybe could be possible changes. And I mentioned Baleba, potentially if he's looking to fill that Caicedo void, he might bring him here if it is obviously all sealed by Saturday.
Yeah, like you said earlier, I think Baleba would be quite good for that Newcastle game, because against West Ham, it looked like there was an issue with Brighton sort of transitioning backwards between their defensive midfield. There was always that gap that Benrahma, Bowen, Antonio, they all filled that gap where usually I think Caicedo would be there bullying them and trying to nick the ball off of them, and it gave them too much time and gave them too much space. Like we saw with the Benrahma goal, he kind of got the ball in the corner, and I think usually Caicedo would be there as a second man marking him, and he kind of managed to find a bit of space on his right, whip it round to Bowen. Yeah, how important do you think that holding midfielder role could be for Brighton this season if they're going to be successful in both the Europa League and the Premier League as well? 100%.
It's such a vital role, really. We've seen it at multiple clubs across the league, even with Manchester United when they signed Casemiro last season. It transformed the season, really. And I think for Brighton, it's a similar kind of effect where you have someone that offers that protection, play the ball forward, and you can allow your attacking players to do the rest almost. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Baleba does start the game against Newcastle, because you mentioned West Ham really kind of thrived from the spaces they found, and you can imagine Newcastle would have similar joy. Bruno Guimaraes, Isak, Almiron, you can imagine there'd be similar kind of issues with that. So yeah, definitely interesting, but you just wonder if he wants to throw a 19-year-old into the firing line straight after signing, but but I think it would be a good way of seeing what he can do. So yeah, I'd like to see him start if he is at the club by then. And be interesting to see how he gets on, and we can really see how he would potentially fill that Caicedo role going forward into the season. Because as you say, it's such an important position in the pitch.
And obviously, Jason Steele started the first 2 games of the season. Verbruggen made his debut on the Saturday. Who do you think will start in between the sticks?
I think he might go back with Jason Steele, I think. Because he started Jason Steele against Luton and against Wolves. Both of them ended up in wins. So I think maybe he might revert to that. Or if we could see 2 and 2. 2 games for Steele, 2 games for Bruggen. You just don't know. That's the thing. It's this very kind of unusual thing we're seeing at the moment with the goalkeeper situation, which we kind of saw last season as well with Robert Sanchez, the first team keeper for much of the season, and all of a sudden he was replaced with Jason Steele. So De Zerbi is quite ruthless in that sense. A little bit of Pep Guardiola about him when he obviously got rid of Joe Hart pretty ruthlessly. So we'll see. We'll see who starts at the weekend. I think I would like to see Verbruggen get another chance. I think it was a shame to see him concede those goals on Saturday, and he'll be looking to make up for it and to keep a clean sheet if he can. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see Jason Steele back in net on Saturday.
Obviously, Jason Steele, he's from the North East. He used to play for Sunderland. Do you think that will give him an extra edge against the Magpies?
Absolutely. Yeah, the extra edge. I think that will be on his mind as well if he is starting the game. He'd really want to win that game. I think absolutely that could potentially be in De Zerbi's thinking as well, maybe, and try and get that fire in him. And yeah, I think De Zerbi, obviously being from Italy as well, would like to face off against an Italian side. So yeah, I think definitely. As a fan, I think they'd be looking for the biggest names possible and to really make a statement.
Definitely. Well, that is everything from us here at Latest TV News. Thank you for tuning in. If you'd like to read more stories from across the county, please visit Sussex World online.